The plasma bolt missed her head by inches. Princess Zarakai dove behind the twisted wreckage of what used to be the Eastern Spire, her violet skin slick with sweat and ash. The human fleet had broken through the orbital defense grid 3 hours ago, and now their soldiers were everywhere, cutting through her royal guard like they were nothing. She pressed her back against the hot metal, trying to catch her breath. Her father was dead. Her brothers were dead. The palace was burning. Everything she knew was collapsing around her, and the humans just kept coming, relentless and terrifying in their advance. She heard boots on debris. Human boots. Zarakai raised her energy blade, the only weapon she had left, and prepared to die with whatever dignity a fallen princess could manage. The footsteps grew closer. She could hear them breathing, could smell the strange scent of their equipment. Then a figure rounded the corner, rifle raised, and she lunged forward with a desperate cry. The human moved faster than she expected, deflecting her blade with his armored forearm and sweeping her legs. She hit the ground hard, the wind knocked from her lungs. Before she could recover, he had pinned her weapon arm down. She struggled, but he was stronger, his armor giving him an advantage she couldn't overcome. This was it. This was how the last princess of Kalarvan would die, crushed beneath a human warrior in the ruins of her own home. Then he removed his helmet. Zarakai stopped struggling. She stopped breathing. Her mind went blank except for one impossible, ridiculous thought. She knew that face. Older now, harder, with scars she didn't recognize and eyes that had seen too much death. But she knew it. Those same brown eyes that used to watch the stars with her. That same crooked smile, though it wasn't smiling now. That same small birthmark just below his left ear. Danny? Her voice came out as barely a whisper. The human warrior froze. His grip on her arm loosened slightly, and she saw something flicker across his face. Confusion, recognition, shock. He stared at her like he was seeing a ghost, his mouth opening but no words coming out. The sounds of battle raged around them, explosions and screams and the thunder of human war machines. But in that moment, everything else seemed to disappear. "Zara," he finally said, and his voice cracked on her name. She felt tears burning in her eyes. 12 years. 12 years since her family had left Earth, since her father's diplomatic mission had ended, since she had said goodbye to the strange human boy who had been her only real friend on that alien world. 12 years since she had promised they would see each other again someday. She had never imagined it would be like this, never imagined he would be the one holding a gun to her conquered world. "You're alive," Danny said, and she couldn't tell if he sounded relieved or horrified. Another explosion rocked the palace, closer this time. Danny looked up, his soldier instincts returning, and Zarakai saw the conflict written across his face. He was here to finish the war. She was the enemy. But she was also the girl who had taught him to read Calorian poetry, the girl who had shown him how to navigate by Calorian's 3 moons, the girl who had cried on his shoulder the night before her family left Earth, promising they would always be friends no matter how far apart they were. The war had made that promise a lie. Now here they were, on opposite sides of humanity's greatest victory and her people's total defeat. And neither of them knew what happened next. The battle for the Kalarvan system had lasted 8 months, but the moment Danny Martinez realized who he was fighting, everything he thought he knew about the war shattered. He pulled Zarakai to her feet, his mind racing through impossible calculations. The mission was clear: secure the palace, eliminate remaining resistance, capture or neutralize the royal family. Command said there were no survivors in the royal bloodline. Command was wrong. The princess was alive, and she was staring at him with those same golden eyes he remembered from when they were both just kids trying to understand each other across the vast gulf between their species. "We need to move," Danny said, forcing himself back into soldier mode. Another squad would be sweeping this sector in minutes. If they found Zarakai, they wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't care that she was unarmed and alone. She was a priority target, and priority targets didn't get taken prisoner. Not after what happened at the Deneb colonies. Zarakai seemed to understand. She nodded, her warrior training taking over despite the shock. "Where are we going?" Danny didn't have an answer. He keyed his comm unit, Martinez, to Alpha Lead. Section 7 clear. Moving to Section 8. The lie came easily, too easily. He was committing treason with every word, but he couldn't stop himself, couldn't just execute her or hand her over to be paraded as a trophy. This was Zara, the girl who had helped him through his mother's death when they were 10. The girl who had spent countless hours trying to explain why her people's empire had expanded so aggressively into human space, even as she admitted she didn't fully understand it herself. He grabbed her arm, gentler than his training demanded, and pulled her toward the servant corridors. The palace layout had been drilled into every soldier in the assault force. He knew there were escape tunnels beneath the western wing. If he could get her there, if he could buy her enough time to disappear into the countryside, maybe she could survive this. Maybe he could figure out what to do with the impossible choice burning in his chest. They ran through smoke and ruin. The palace Zarakai had grown up in was unrecognizable now, its beautiful crystalline architecture shattered by human artillery. She moved silently beside him, and he could feel her grief radiating like heat. Her whole world was ending. Her family was gone. Her people were defeated. And the one person from her past who had just reappeared was wearing the uniform of the conquerors. "Why did you join them?" she asked as they ducked into a collapsed hallway. Her voice was steady, but he heard the accusation beneath it. "You were never violent. You hated conflict. You used to cry when we watched nature documentaries and the predators caught their prey." Danny felt the words hit him like physical blows. "I grew up. The war started. People I loved died." He didn't look at her. Couldn't. "Your empire killed 3 billion humans at Deneb Station. 3 billion, Zara, including my sister, including my father." He heard her sharp intake of breath. When he finally glanced over, her face had gone pale, her violet skin almost gray. "I didn't know. I wasn't told. They never told us about Deneb." The military report said it was a strategic operation against a military installation. Her hands were shaking. 3 billion? 3 billion civilians, men, women, children. Your people used a solar detonator. Cooked the entire system. Danny's voice was flat, emotionless. He had learned to talk about Deneb without feeling it, without letting the rage consume him. That was 2 years ago. That's when I enlisted. That's when everything changed. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Danny checked his tactical display. Clear for now, but that wouldn't last. He started dismantling a wall panel, revealing the access shaft he knew was there. "When you left Earth, when your family went back to Kalarven, what happened? Why did your father start the war?" Zarakai helped him pull away debris. He didn't want war. The High Council forced his hand. They saw humanity as a threat. You were expanding too fast, colonizing too aggressively. They were afraid, so they struck first. She laughed bitterly. "Afraid. We were afraid of you. And now, look what that fear has brought us." Danny understood fear. He had lived with it for 2 years every day, wondering if he would survive the next battle. Fear of the Calarian plasma weapons that could vaporize a man in an instant. Fear of their faster-than-light drives that made them impossible to predict. Fear of an empire that had ruled this sector of space for 3,000 years and saw humanity as nothing more than upstart primitives who needed to be eliminated. But humanity had proven everyone wrong. Earth had united for the first time in its bloody history. Every nation, every faction, every divided group had come together under one banner. The war machine they built was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity didn't have energy shields or plasma weapons or ancient technology. They had rage. They had determination. And they had Danny Martinez, along with 10 million other soldiers just like him, willing to die to make sure Deneb never happened again. He got the access panel open. The tunnel beyond was dark and narrow. This leads to the underground river system. Follow it north for 3 kilometers and you'll reach the forest. From there, you're on your own. I can't help you anymore. Zarakai grabbed his arm. Come with me. What? Come with me. Desert. Leave this behind. We can go somewhere they'll never find us, somewhere beyond both our peoples. Her eyes were desperate, pleading. Danny, please, I just got you back. I can't lose you again. Not like this. For a moment he was 10 years old again, sitting with her in the gardens of the human embassy on Kalarvan, both of them making promises about a future that seemed bright and full of possibilities. For a moment he wanted nothing more than to say yes, to leave behind the blood and the screaming and the endless nightmare of war, to just be Danny again, instead of Sergeant Martinez, assault team leader, decorated combat veteran, killer of exactly 47 Calarian soldiers. Then his comm unit crackled. All units, priority alert. Thermal scans indicate survivor in the royal family. Female Calarian Sector 7. All teams converge. Shoot to kill. Danny's blood turned to ice. They had found her. Or they had seen his thermal signature with hers and put the pieces together. Either way, they had minutes at best. Go, he said, pushing her toward the tunnel. Go now. Not without you. Zara, I can't. I'm a soldier. I have orders. I have a duty. You need to run. She was crying now, violet tears streaking down her face. You saved me. Why save me if you're just going to let him hunt me down? He didn't have an answer. Didn't have time for answers. He heard boots approaching, heard the distinctive hum of human plasma rifles charging. They were close. Too close. He pulled his sidearm and handed it to her. Safety's here. Point and shoot. It has 15 rounds. Make them count. Zarakai took the weapon with trembling hands. This isn't over. I won't let it be over. It was over the moment we met again, Danny said. You just don't know it yet. She dropped into the tunnel. He sealed the panel behind her and turned to face the approaching soldiers, his mind already constructing the lie he would tell, already preparing to betray everything he believed in one more time, because he had fought this war for 2 years, had seen friends die, had killed enemies without hesitation, but he couldn't kill her. Wouldn't. Even if it cost him everything. The war had made him a warrior. But Zarakai had just reminded him he was still human, and that was either going to save them both or destroy them utterly. Danny stood in the corridor as footsteps thundered closer, his rifle held ready in a posture that suggested vigilance rather than the terror gripping his chest. The lie was simple. He had cleared this section. He had found nothing. The thermal signature must have been residual heat from a dying power core or a glitch in the scanning equipment. Simple, clean, believable. He had told 1,000 lies in this war already. One more shouldn't matter. Lieutenant Carson appeared first, flanked by 4 soldiers from Baker's squad. Hard faces, harder eyes. These were veterans who had seen everything and trusted nothing. Carson's gaze swept the corridor, lingered on Danny, then moved past him. Martinez, report. Section clear, sir? No contacts. Danny kept his voice level. Bored, even. Just another empty corridor and an empty palace. Whatever thermal picked up was gone by the time I got here. Carson didn't look convinced. He never did. The man was paranoid. But paranoid soldiers survived. Funny. Thermal says the signature was human adjacent. Still warm, still here? He nodded to his team. Spread out. Check everything. Danny felt his pulse spike, but kept his expression neutral. If they found the access panel, if they opened it, Zarakai would still be close enough to catch. He had bought her maybe 3 minutes. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. He watched the soldiers move through the debris, watched them scan walls and floors, watched them get closer to where she had disappeared. Then the palace shook. A massive explosion from somewhere deep in the lower levels sent cracks spiraling through the ceiling. Dust and fragments rained down. Carson cursed and keyed his comm. What the hell was that? Engineering level just went critical, came the response, crackling with static. Calarians must have set scuttling charges. We're evacuating the lower third of the structure. All teams pull back to safe zones. Carson looked frustrated but nodded. You heard them. Move out. Buildings coming down. He pointed at Danny. You too, Martinez. We'll sweep this sector again when it's stable. Danny followed them out, relief and guilt warring in his chest. The explosion had saved him from discovery, but it also meant more destruction, more death. The palace was ancient, a cultural monument that had stood for 2 millennia. Now it was collapsing like everything else in this war. Beautiful things reduced to rubble. History erased. And for what? So humanity could prove it was stronger? So Collivan could learn what happened to empires that underestimated Earth? They evacuated to the outer courtyard, where the full scope of the devastation became clear. The once magnificent palace was a burning shell. Human gunships circled overhead like predatory birds. Calarian civilians huddled in detention zones, defeated and afraid. Danny saw children in those groups, saw families clinging to each other, saw the same terror he had seen in human refugees fleeing Calarian bombardments. War didn't discriminate. It destroyed everyone equally. Hell of a thing, isn't it? The voice belonged to Corporal Amy Hughes, one of the few soldiers Danny actually considered a friend. She stood beside him, her armor scorched and dented, her face exhausted. We won. This is what victory looks like. Yeah, Danny said quietly. Victory. You don't sound convinced. He wasn't. 2 years ago, when he enlisted, victory meant avenging his family, meant making Calaven pay for Deneb, meant ensuring humanity's survival. Now, standing in the ruins of an alien civilization, surrounded by the conquered and the broken, he wasn't sure what it meant anymore. He thought of Zarakai somewhere in the tunnels beneath their feet, running for her life from soldiers who would kill her without hesitation. He thought of the girl she used to be, teaching him her language, sharing her culture, bridging the impossible gap between their worlds. Where had that bridge gone? When had it burned? Martinez. Carson was shouting his name. Danny turned to see the lieutenant approaching with someone else. Someone whose uniform carried more insignia, more authority. A major. Danny snapped to attention. Sergeant Martinez, the major said. His name tag read Collins. Danny had never seen him before, but his reputation preceded him. Collins was intelligence, the kind of officer who made problems disappear. "I need to speak with you, privately." Danny's blood went cold. They knew. Somehow they knew. He followed Collins to a makeshift command tent at the edge of the courtyard, his mind racing through excuses and explanations, none of them good enough. Inside the tent, Collins pulled up a holographic display showing thermal imaging from the palace interior. "This is from 20 minutes ago," Collins said, pointing to 2 heat signatures in Sector 7. One human-sized, one slightly smaller, slightly different. "That's you. And that's the Calarian princess we've been hunting. You were alone with her for 4 minutes? She's a priority target, the last surviving member of the royal family. And somehow, she escaped." Collins turned to face Danny directly. "Where is she?" Danny met his gaze. Lying to Carson was one thing. Lying to intelligence was something else entirely. But he did it anyway. "She attacked me. We fought. The building shook, ceiling came down. When the dust cleared, she was gone. Must have used the confusion to escape." "Interesting." Collins pulled up another display. This one showed the access panel Danny had opened. "Our scans show this was unsealed from the inside, recently, right where you were standing. Emergency exit," Danny said. "Probably part of the royal evacuation system. She must have known about it." "Must have." Collins studied him for a long moment. "You know what's interesting, Martinez? Your service record is exemplary. 2 years of combat. 47 confirmed kills. 3 commendations. 0 infractions. A model soldier." He paused. "Until today. I don't know what you're suggesting, sir. I'm suggesting that you let her go. I'm suggesting that you helped her escape. I'm suggesting that you committed treason." Collins leaned forward. "Want to know what makes me think that? You were stationed on Caloran as a child. Your mother was a cultural attaché. The princess, Zara Kai, was the daughter of the Calarian ambassador to Earth. You knew her. You were friends." Every word was a nail in his coffin. Danny kept his face blank, but inside he was scrambling. They had done their research. They knew everything. "That was 12 years ago. We were kids. I didn't even recognize her." "Really?" "Because our facial recognition software says you stared at each other for almost 30 seconds before you moved. That's a long time to not recognize someone." Collins pulled up one more image. This one showed Danny handing something to Zarakai, his sidearm. The evidence was damning and absolute. Danny said nothing. There was nothing to say. He had been caught. He had committed treason. He had betrayed everything he swore to uphold, and he would do it again in a heartbeat. "I should have you arrested," Collins said. "Court-martialed. Executed, probably. Treason during wartime carries the death penalty." He turned off the displays. "But I'm not going to do that." Danny blinked. "Sir? The war is over, Martinez. We won. The Calarian military is destroyed. Their government has surrendered. Their empire is finished. What happens to one runaway princess doesn't matter anymore." Collins sat down, suddenly looking tired. What matters is what comes next. Peace, reconstruction, integration, and for that, we need bridges. We need people who understand both sides. People like you. "I don't understand." "You will. You're being reassigned. New unit, new mission. Details are classified, but let's just say you'll be working on establishing diplomatic relations with the surviving Calarian leadership. You speak the language. You understand their culture. And apparently, you have personal connections that could prove valuable." Collins smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course, if you prefer, I can always file the treason charges instead. It wasn't a choice. It was a cage dressed up as an opportunity. Danny knew exactly what Collins was doing, using his mistake, his moment of weakness, as leverage. He would be watched, monitored, every action scrutinized, but he would be alive. And more importantly, Zarakai would be alive. For now, I accept the reassignment, sir. Good. Report to Forward Operating Base Meridian at 0600 tomorrow. Dismissed. Danny saluted and left the tent, his mind reeling. The war was over. Humanity had won. But standing in the ruins of Calavan's capital, surrounded by the ashes of an ancient civilization, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the beginning of something else, something more complicated, something that would require him to be more than just a soldier. That night, as he lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, Danny thought about Zarakai. Wondered if she had made it to the forest. Wondered if she was safe. Wondered if they would ever see each other again. The girl from his childhood had become the enemy. The enemy had become a refugee, and he had become something he didn't fully understand. A traitor who was somehow also a patriot. A soldier who had won the war but lost something essential in the process. The war was over, but their story was just beginning. And Danny had no idea where it would lead. He only knew that he had made a choice in that corridor, a choice that would define everything that came after. He had chosen Zara over duty, friendship over orders, humanity over the war machine that had consumed his life for 2 years. Now he would have to live with the consequences, whatever they might be. Zarakai emerged from the tunnels 3 hours before dawn, her lungs burning and her body shaking with exhaustion. The forest Danny had directed her to was dense and alien, nothing like the cultivated gardens of the palace. She had never been outside the capital before. Her life had been one of privilege and protection, carefully controlled and monitored. Now she was alone in the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back and a human pistol she barely knew how to use. She found a hollow beneath the roots of a massive tree and collapsed into it, letting herself cry for the first time since the invasion began. Her father was dead. Her brothers were dead. Her people were conquered. Everything she had ever known was gone. And the only person who had shown her mercy was a childhood friend who had become the enemy, a friend who had lost his own family to her people's brutality. 3 billion dead at Deneb, the number haunted her. She had been told it was a military operation, a necessary strike against human expansion. She had believed it because she had been taught to believe it. The High Council never lied. The military never made mistakes. Kalaravan was righteous and humanity was the aggressor. Every broadcast, every report, every official statement had reinforced that narrative. But Danny's eyes had told a different story. The pain in his voice when he mentioned his sister, his father, that wasn't propaganda. That was real grief, real loss. And if he was telling the truth about Deneb, what else had her government lied about? She thought about the war from this new perspective. Thought about the human colonies Kalarian forces had destroyed, the civilian ships they had targeted, the prisoners who had disappeared into detention facilities and never emerged. She had never questioned it, never asked what happened to those people. She had been too comfortable, too insulated, too willing to believe that her empire was benevolent and just. Danny had called her people an empire. She had always thought of Calavan as a civilization, a culture, a beacon of progress. But he was right. They were conquerors. They had expanded through this sector of space by subjugating other species, absorbing their worlds, erasing their independence. They called it unity. They called it bringing order to chaos. But it was conquest. It was empire. And empires always fell eventually. As dawn broke through the canopy above, Zarakai forced herself to move. She couldn't stay here. Human patrols would be searching. She needed to get farther from the capital, deeper into the wilderness. She needed to survive long enough to figure out what came next. If there was anything that came next, she traveled north, using the stars to navigate. It was something Danny had taught her when they were children, how to read Earth's constellations and find direction. The stars here were different, but the principle remained the same. She wondered if he had remembered that, if it had crossed his mind when he told her to go north. A small connection across the years and the war. A tiny thread of their shared past that hadn't been completely severed. The forest was full of sounds she didn't recognize. Creatures moving through the undergrowth. Birds that sang in frequencies that hurt her ears. The rustle of wind through leaves that were shaped differently than anything in the royal gardens. She was an alien on her own world now, displaced, unwelcome, hunted. She walked for 3 days, avoiding roads and settlements, drinking from streams and eating what little vegetation she recognized as safe. The pistol Danny had given her remained unused. She saw patrols twice, human soldiers moving through the forest in formation, but she managed to hide before they spotted her. On the 3rd night, weak with hunger and exhaustion, she stumbled into a small village. It was populated entirely by Calarians. Refugees, she realized, people who had fled the capital when the invasion began. They stared at her with suspicion and fear until an elderly female recognized the royal markings on her clothing. Then fear turned to shock, and shock to something like hope. "Princess," the old woman breathed, kneeling. Others followed suit. Within minutes, Zarakai found herself surrounded by her own people, all of them looking at her like she was their salvation. She wanted to tell them she wasn't, wanted to explain that she was just as lost and broken as they were. But they needed hope. They needed to believe that the royal line had survived, that their civilization wasn't completely erased. So she let them kneel, let them call her princess, and she tried to figure out how to be what they needed. The village elder, a man named Corin, took her to his home and gave her food and water. "We thought you were dead," he said. "The broadcast said the entire royal family perished in the palace attack." "Human broadcasts?" Zarakai asked. "Yes. They control all communications now. They say the war is over. They say we must surrender and accept human authority." Corin's face was bitter. "Some have already complied. Others are organizing resistance. The humans may have won the war, but they haven't conquered our spirit." Resistance. The word made Zarakai's stomach turn. More fighting, more death, more destruction. What kind of resistance? Sabotage, assassinations, raids on human supply lines. "Nothing organized yet, but it's growing." Corin leaned forward. "With you alive, with the princess leading us, we could actually win. We could drive the humans off our world." Zarakai thought about Danny, thought about the soldiers who had lost family at Denabed, thought about the cycle of violence that had brought them to this point. More resistance meant more human retaliation, more dead on both sides, more grief and rage and endless war. "No," she said quietly. "Princess, no more fighting. The war is over. We lost. If we resist, they'll kill us all. They have the ships, the weapons, the numbers. All we'll accomplish is more death." She met Corin's shocked gaze. "I won't lead anyone to slaughter. But we can't just surrender. Can't just accept occupation." Corin's voice rose. "Your father would never have..." My father is dead. His policies led to this. His fear of humanity, his aggression, his refusal to negotiate, all of it led here. Zara-Kai stood, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. If I'm princess, if I have any authority left, then I'm ordering peace. No resistance, no attacks. We survive. We rebuild. We find a way to coexist with the humans. The room was silent. She could see the doubt in their eyes, the disappointment. They had wanted a warrior princess to lead them to glory. Instead, they got someone who had been saved by the enemy, someone who preached surrender, but she didn't care. She had seen enough death, caused enough suffering through her people's arrogance. Over the following weeks, word spread. The princess lived. She was gathering refugees. She was calling for peace. Some came to her village. Others denounced her as a collaborator and a coward. The resistance formed anyway, operating in the mountains and the deep forests, striking at human convoys and installations, and every attack brought swift retaliation. Zara-Kai watched from her exile as her world burned, watched human forces destroy entire settlements suspected of harboring insurgents, watched her own people suicide bomb human checkpoints, watched the cycle she had hoped to break continue unabated, and she felt helpless, useless, a princess without power, a leader without followers, a symbol without meaning. Then, 2 months after her escape from the palace, a human transport arrived in her village. She expected soldiers, expected arrest or execution. Instead, Danny stepped off the transport dressed in a diplomatic uniform rather than combat armor. He looked different, older, tired, but when their eyes met, she saw the same boy she had known, the same friend who had saved her life. "Hello, Zara," he said. "Hello, Danny." And just like that, everything became complicated again. 'Cause he wasn't just here to visit. He was here with an offer, a proposal from the Human Occupation Authority. They wanted her to lead a provisional government, wanted her to legitimize their occupation by giving it a Calarian face, wanted her to become a puppet, a tool to pacify her people and make conquest look like liberation. "Why would I help you?" she asked when they were alone. "Why would I betray my people like that?" "Because if you don't, they'll die. All of them." Danny's voice was bleak. "The resistance is giving the hardliners in human command exactly what they want, an excuse to implement extreme measures, deportations, mass detentions, forced relocations. There are people in my government who want to erase Calarian culture entirely, make this world into a human colony with no trace of what came before. And you think I can stop them? I think you're the only one who can. If you lead, if you give your people a path forward that doesn't involve suicide attacks and guerrilla warfare, you might save your civilization. It won't be the same. It won't be independent. But it will survive." He paused. "Isn't survival better than extinction?" Zara-Kai wanted to say no, wanted to reject his offer and maintain her integrity. But she thought about the children in the village, the families trying to rebuild, the old ones who remembered Calavan before the war. They deserved a future, even a compromised one. "I'll do it," she said, "on one condition." "What?" "You stay. You be my liaison to the human authority. You help me navigate this. I don't trust anyone else." She looked at him directly. "Can I trust you, Danny?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. "Yeah, you can trust me." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Trust was impossible between conqueror and conquered. But it was the best they had. So Zara-Kai accepted the role of provisional leader, accepted the responsibility of guiding her broken people through occupation and towards something that might eventually look like peace. And Danny became her bridge to the human authority, translating demands and negotiating compromises and trying to prevent the worst excesses of occupation. They worked together every day, argued constantly, fought over policy and implementation and the meaning of justice. But slowly, impossibly, they began to make progress. Refugee camps became settlements. Detention facilities released prisoners. The resistance lost support as people saw an alternative path. And Zarakai started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the ashes. But trust was still impossible. And in the shadows, forces on both sides were gathering. Forces that wanted war to continue. Forces that saw peace as betrayal. And they were watching the princess and her human friend with growing anger. The storm was coming. They just didn't know it yet. 6 months into the occupation, someone tried to kill Zarakai. The bomb went off during a public assembly in what used to be the capital's central plaza. She survived because Danny saw the device a second before it detonated and threw her behind a reinforced barrier. 8 Calarians died. 14 were wounded. The message was clear. The resistance saw her as a traitor, and traitors deserved death. Danny stood over her in the aftermath, his ears ringing, blood running down his face from shrapnel cuts. "We need to get you out of here." "No." Zarakai pushed herself up, staring at the carnage. Her people, killed by other Calarians because she had chosen peace over pride. "We stay. We help the wounded. We show them we won't be intimidated. Zara, they just tried to assassinate you, and they failed. If I run now, if I hide, they win. The resistance gets to claim I'm a coward, that I only care about my own life." She grabbed his arm. "Please, help me help them." So they stayed, worked alongside human medics and Calarian volunteers to save who they could. And when the media drones arrived, when the cameras focused on the princess covered in dust and blood, tending to her wounded people beside a human soldier, the image went viral across both their civilizations. Some saw collaboration, others saw hope, but everyone saw that something was changing. The Human Occupation Authority wanted to use the attack as justification for cracking down on resistance cells. Danny argued against it in every meeting, every briefing. "You'll just create more insurgents, more rage, more violence. We need to address the underlying issues." "The underlying issue is that they don't accept our authority," Colonel Patterson said. She was the military governor, a hard woman who had seen too much combat to believe in soft solutions. "They need to learn that resistance has consequences." "They already know that," Danny shot back. "What they need to learn is that cooperation has benefits." That's what Zarakai is trying to show them. The princess is a useful tool, but she's still Calarian, still the enemy. Don't forget that, Lieutenant. Patterson had promoted him after the assassination attempt, but the rank felt hollow. Your job is to manage her, not befriend her. But they were friends, or something more complicated than friendship. Danny and Zarakai spent hours together every day, working on reconstruction projects, mediating disputes between humans and Calarians, trying to build institutions that could function in a post-war world. And slowly, despite everything that should have kept them apart, they were rebuilding the connection they'd had as children. "Do you remember the observatory?" Zarakai asked one night as they reviewed settlement proposals. They were alone in her office, a converted warehouse that smelled of concrete and recycled air. "On Earth, when my family was stationed there." Danny smiled. It was one of his few good memories from that time. "Yeah, you showed me how to use the Calarian star charts." "Said I was terrible at it." You were terrible at it. You kept mixing up the coordinate systems. She laughed, and for a moment she sounded like the girl he remembered. But you tried so hard. You always tried so hard to understand my world. I wanted to impress you, Danny admitted. You were this exotic alien princess, and I was just some diplomat's kid who liked books too much. You were my only real friend. Everyone else just wanted to be near the princess. You wanted to know Zara. She set down her tablet and looked at him directly. I missed you. After we left, I missed having someone who saw me as a person instead of a symbol. I missed you too. The words felt dangerous, felt like crossing a line they had carefully avoided for months. When the war started, when I heard Kalarvin was the enemy, I wondered if you were okay, if you were safe, if you even remembered me. I remembered. I never forgot. Zarakai stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rebuilt sections of the city. Human architecture next to Kalarian designs. Two civilizations, learning to coexist. Danny, what are we doing? Really? Building peace? Trying to prevent more war. No, I mean us. You and me. What are we doing? She turned to face him. Because this feels like more than just professional cooperation. It feels like something neither of us is willing to name. Danny knew what she meant. Felt it every time they worked late together, every time her hand accidentally brushed his. Every time he caught himself staring at her and had to look away. It was impossible and inappropriate and absolutely forbidden. Fraternization between occupation forces and local populations was strictly prohibited. And even if it wasn't, the optics would be devastating. The human soldier and the Kalarian princess. It would be seen as conquest in the most personal way, as domination and submission dressed up as romance. We can't, he said quietly. You know we can't, I know, but that doesn't change how I feel. She moved closer. You saved my life, you've protected me. You've fought for my people when you had no reason to. You've been everything I needed when my world fell apart. Zara, stop. Danny backed away. This is a mistake. If anyone found out, it would destroy everything we've built. The hardliners would use it as proof that you're a collaborator. That I'm taking advantage. It would set back the peace process by years. I don't care about the peace process right now. I care about you. Her voice cracked. I'm tired of being the princess, tired of being a symbol. I just want to be Zara again. And I want you to be Danny, like we were before all of this. We can't go back. The war happened. Everything changed. But even as he said it, Danny knew he was lying to himself, knew that his feelings for her had been growing since the moment he recognized her in the palace ruins. Maybe longer. Maybe they had never really gone away. The moment stretched between them, electric, dangerous, full of possibility and impossibility in equal measure. Danny knew he should leave, should walk out and maintain professional distance, should remember his duty and his position and all the reasons this was wrong. Instead, he kissed her. It was brief, gentle, filled with 12 years of separation and 2 years of war and 6 months of rebuilding something that should have been impossible. When they pulled apart, both of them were shaking. This is a really bad idea, Danny whispered. The worst, Sarakai agreed. They kissed again anyway. And in that moment, the war and the occupation and all the political complications disappeared. They were just two people who had found each other across the vast, impossible gulf between their worlds. Two friends who had become something more despite everything that should have kept them apart. But the universe doesn't care about impossible love stories. And in the morning, reality would come crashing back. Because people were watching. People who had agendas. People who saw Danny and Zara Kai as threats to their plans. And they were already moving to tear apart everything the two of them had built. The storm was here. And it would test everything they believed about loyalty, duty, and love in a world still bleeding from war.